Hey everyone, welcome to the Grind Together podcast. We're the Grinders. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Matt. And on this podcast, we want to create opportunities for growth through real conversation.
Let's go. What's up, guys? We are so excited. We have one of our most favorite people in the entire world here with us today. Our coach, the most incredible woman on the face of the planet, someone that we owe like literally everything to. I'm going to cry if I talk about it too much, but we have Tawnya Nielsen here and she's incredible.
So excited to be here.
Yes. So we're excited to have her. We asked her to come on and kind of share some of her knowledge and we learned everything we know through you. You are our guru. So it's so fun having you here. We literally owe you our marriage, our
Definitely.
everything really, like our life now, like I'm not kidding you when I say we owe you a lot. So thank you for coming on.
I'm so excited to be here. It's funny because I was asking you before we started, are you okay if I talk about you guys? And there is, I've coached probably, I don't know, at this point, thousands of people.
Yeah.
And it is that rare to have a couple like you come in. And so trust me when I say it was equally as fun for me to watch you guys move and courageously do what you did was a blast for me as well. So,
well, thank you. We're excited to dive in.
Yeah. Even hearing you say that, I'm like, I might have just switched our topic because, yeah, you just said we moved quickly. And I understood that when we were coaching with you because I didn't actually.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think you did.
But you kept saying it.
Yeah,
and so I'm like,
then
I guess we moved quickly. And I'm like, what does
that really mean? Yeah.
But no, at the same time, I'm like, I love that. And it's like when people ask us how we got to where we're at right now, I'm like, well, we went 6 months with coaching. And then she was like, hey, you guys could do this too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You kind of talked a little bit about talking about the individual journey first.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a process that I believe in order to get connection, we have to know ourselves.
Beautiful.
That alone, I think, is a very difficult thing to do. Most people looking in the mirror is our number one fear. And so I work with people for years to just look in the mirror, to be accountable, to know themselves, to dive as deep as you guys did into your subconscious, into your own patterns, into your own accountability. So when I saw that move that fast, I was like, okay, what comes next, right, for you guys? Because really holding on to the belief and the understanding of conscious relationships, you just don't see them every day, right? You mostly see two individuals who think they're in the same world and they're trying to convince each other that they're in the same world. They don't actually know each other. They've actually just characterized each other in each other's storyline, right? But they don't actually get to know each other. So when I saw you guys do that, I was just so excited to say, okay, now what could you guys do together? And so it was so fun to watch you guys know yourselves, be able to be accountable to yourselves and be able to share that vulnerably, because that alone, I mean, as you know now as coaches, right? You know how difficult that is for people to do that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
No, absolutely. And I think that's so not that it's rare, because we've seen it even with the people that we've coached, but it's difficult because one person will come in and say like, hey, I'm looking to do the work and I want to work on myself, but my spouse isn't ready.
Yeah.
And my spouse isn't willing. Right. What have you seen as far as the biggest success for you in getting the spouse in the room?
That's interesting. Getting them in the room.
Yeah, as far as hey, I'm doing,
or getting them to
or because
buy in.
The goal, buy in. If the goal is being self-aware, it's the wife's becoming self-aware, the wife's doing coaching, the wife's learning, but then the husband's like, I don't want to talk about my stuff.
Sometimes it's flipped.
I was going to say, obviously not gender-based, but I think this is an interesting question, because what comes up for me is most people don't come in until they feel enough pain.
Yeah.
Until they feel the contrast, until they're afraid they're going to lose something. And so getting the partner in that is resistant usually comes with their own level or comfortability with pain. And when they decide they're going to lose something or that it's worth the investment.
Wow. Okay. That's a cool angle on that. We've never thought about that.
Yeah. I want to ask you really quick. I want to know like your story a little bit. I want you to tell everyone your story. I mean, we kind of know a little bit of your story and like what made you want to coach and like what kind of brought you into this world and like just kind of your background and your story. I mean, you have an incredible one. So, I mean, tell us your story, Tawnya.
Well, I was a hairdresser, owned salons for, and I don't know, what was it, 10, 15 years. It's not a lie when people say that their stylist is their therapist.
Yep.
That was a real deal. And I realized that it wasn't hair that I was really passionate about. I never really wanted to talk about hair. I just loved people's stories and I loved getting to know them. I loved that intimate space where I could really connect with them. So that's where it started. And then we all know, I've heard Matt say it several times, your message type deal, right? So life just gave me the thing that it always gives all of us, and that is the dismantling of my own illusion and my own fairy tale. And I found out that my husband had been cheating on me, and I had been ignoring everything.
Yeah.
Holding so tight to my fantasy, holding so tight to what was going to make me feel safe. When he beautifully rocked my world, I got obsessed, absolutely obsessed with why it didn't work. What did I do wrong? Right. That was a big question. And what doesn't, who am I in this? Cause when I didn't have my titles, when I wasn't the wife, when I wasn't the mother, all of those things, you get left looking at yourself. And, I just got obsessed with what was, not true in my life and how to find the truth for me. So that was the biggest part of that.
Yeah. No, well, and you're also like, you have like 6 kids. So you're a total badass that way. She has 6 kids.
That was amazing.
That was always amazing to me. Like I was like, wait, you have how many children? Like I come from a family of 6. So I was like, wait, I know how much work that is. And then being like the mom of that, and then just like all the things you've created, you have a book that it's called Inscape. That's incredible. We read it. So go buy that if you need like a good little book to read. It's very, very, very good.
It's not a good little book to read. It's like literally
it's
changed our lives.
Like, no, it's not. I mean, it's a
right,
good
but
size.
the way that she
like
talks about it, I'm like, it's not like it's
no,
not bad.
it's like so good.
Book.
Yeah, like I'm like
it's a little meditative. It's not like your typical book. I didn't write it for just like the beginning chapters. I wrote it for people who had already kind of started the journey.
Yeah, but it's really good. So if you're interested, it's called Inscape. Yeah. But so I'm interested because I love that you say like, okay, I was so obsessed with trying to figure out, like why it didn't work, right? Yeah. And you coach a lot of different people. You coach like individuals, you coach couples, like all across the board, right? Yep. We get this question a lot, and it's hard for us because like we are in a marriage. At what point are you like, okay, yeah, no, like I've learned, because we heard you say all the time with relationships, like don't just cut it out and like leave it and like be like, no, I'm going to run away from it. Right. Like I was really good at that. And you held me so accountable at being like, you're running away. Why are you running away? Yeah. At what point are you kind of like, hey, this relationship isn't serving me anymore? Because we know a lot of people in our lives that are just kind of like, hey, I've gone 10 rounds and I've tried my very hardest. Like, when do you know when enough is enough a little bit?
It's a great question. And I think it's very individual based.
Okay.
I also went back in for several cycles to try, and I kept trying to change myself, figure out, and I did, and so I think when you feel complete.
Oh, I love that.
I think when you've done everything you could do, right? Unfortunately, I think that a lot of people buy into the fact that somebody else can make you feel a certain way. And I realize that's not true. It doesn't matter how much work I do or how happy I am or what I share. Agency is a very real deal. His world was a very real deal. He gets to decide what he wants. And I think knowing when I'm complete is the first part. But I think behind that is knowing my value. That was one of the biggest parts, is the more I started to love myself, the more I knew my value, the more the relationship wasn't lining up, right? The more I was like, oh, wait, I know I'm more valuable than this. I know I can be, I know how I'm showing up, and I know what I'm putting into this relationship, and when it's not being received, and receiving is a very difficult thing to do. I knew how to give. but I did not know how to receive.
Yep.
And so the more value I started to feel in myself, the more I loved myself, the more I was just like, oh, as much as I want this to work, it doesn't match what I feel within myself.
I really love that a lot, because I feel that to my core. I'm always like, I always tell Matt, I'm like, it's like a level of self-respect in my world. Like, that's kind of how I have to coin it. It's like, it's a level of self-respect of, I just value myself so much that I can't, like, I'm just not seeing it anymore. Like, I'm not seeing that value from you. Like, I can kind of, I'm not receiving it.
Yes.
So.
And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people get frustrated and their ego, right? Their story in their head will say, I'm more valuable than this, right? They'll say, I need to leave because I love myself too much, right? We will try on that story.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it true. That's the interesting part, right? So I think the brutal honesty of what we feel inside is one of the most difficult parts. And so, yes, we can say I'm more valuable and we can know it with our head, but there is a huge difference in the peace and the space that I feel in my body when I feel that valuable, that is so different than just the story. So I think a lot of people will run saying that I know my value, and I will watch people do that. And it's like, do you really? Because if you did, this wouldn't hurt as bad.
Oh, there we go. That's what I was looking for.
I was like, I was about to ask you, like, how do you know that then? Like, if you're not
the ego
conscious
would
of
be
it.
fighting for value outside of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So if I need something outside of myself, if I need my partner to change, or if I need anything outside of myself, then it's still my way of trying to fight for my value instead of internally feeling that completeness inside me, where it's like the reason I feel complete is because I can feel no more lack inside of me. I feel no more pain. I feel no more disconnect. So
wait, I think you just solved it for like most people. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Have you said that to people?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Because like,
That's
usually
where
if
you're like, wait,
if
what?
I can walk away from it and it doesn't hurt, and like I'm okay with myself,
Yes.
that's beautiful.
Yes.
That is really beautiful. Because I've always kind of wondered that. Because a lot of times, like, we talk to people and there's still so much, like, they've had a breakup, or like there's been a past relationships.
Yes.
Because like you taught us a ton about relationships follow you. Like, all of those relationships, all like encompassing with like family members and everything, it all follows you, right? So it's like, when do you know to let go? And it's like, wait, when there's no pain. Because a lot of times they're like, oh, and there's bitterness, or there's some kind of feeling towards the relationship. And it's like, wait, are you really over that? And they're like, yeah, I'm totally fine, right? And you're like, no, actually you're not. You know?
And it's scary to tell people that because moving into pain can be a little bit controversial, right? You can also say, this is too painful, I need to leave. And that's also true, right? I think there's a layer to that makes so much sense. And obviously none of us will ever condone any type of abusive relationships. And I think knowing the difference in that is really important.
Yeah.
Of course, that being said, even in those relationships, they are still teaching us the kind of abuse that we feel inside of ourselves. And so, yes, I think that leaving when there is pain is something that people also use. I was just obsessed with, why did I feel pain?
Yeah.
Why did I not feel valuable? Why was this actually, when I knew everything was inside of me, I was obsessed with finding out where it was at and where it was from. Because it's never really actually from our partner.
Yeah.
The way that we think it is. It's usually from our childhood. And so there's so much deep inner work to do with that I just got obsessed with doing. So it looks like I was just heading for pain all the time, but I knew that that's where it was guiding me. I knew when I was afraid, I knew when I was feeling lack, I knew when I was feeling disconnected, that it was something still in me.
Yeah.
So I was relentless about it.
So then there's the opposite question. Are you dating anybody right now?
I'm not actually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There's the opposite question then, is like, how do you know if somebody's actually right for you?
I love that question.
Because we've talked about, okay, cool, and now you can leave anytime you want,
Yeah.
because this is a self journey.
Yeah.
And if it's not serving you, then great, look
Yeah.
at it. And if it doesn't hurt, then go.
Yeah.
But how do you know it's the right person? Because we just had somebody on the podcast that literally told us, he was like, I could have made looking back retrospectively, I could have made the last 12 relationships actually work. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Right is an interesting word, right? Because it's like,
and I have my own perception of this answer. I really want to know yours. Yeah.
I think what comes up with me first is everybody is right for us based off of any type of attraction that we have, right? So I think everybody is a mirror. And so what is the right relationship is a little bit of a trap, in my opinion, to get into right and wrong and to judge what should or shouldn't be.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
ultimately, I think that keeps us very confined and limited. If I'm attracted to something or somebody, it's something I want to see in myself. So I would say that's one part of it.
I love Tawnya.
I would say the second part is you don't know what's right, in my opinion, until you know yourself to whatever level you decide to know. And I think that the more you grow and the more you evolve, I think the people around you do the same.
Yeah.
So the attachment to who's my person or who's right and like, never letting go is just something that I had to really dissolve in my line of thinking.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating too, though, for people that, because we've had clients that have like gotten divorced and then recently entered the dating game too, and they're like, "This is too exhausting," right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
And we're
but
like,
yeah.
It's interesting because I find a lot of people who, and I think a lot of your listeners will feel the same way.
Yeah.
You hear the story and the narrative, or maybe it's in the rom-coms, or maybe it's like wherever it is, right? In the romance of it all. First love. Right? You hear it all the time,
Ooh,
right? The
yeah.
first love is always the thing. And then you could say, I've got all these loves after that. And most people will tell you, right, that the more life they live, the more they realize, to your last guest point, all 12 of them could have worked. And the point is that they did work.
Yeah.
That was the point, right?
Yeah.
Like they really did move you into whatever space you needed to get to. But yeah, the right person is going to be a match vibrationally to what you know about yourself. So we can only receive to the level that we love ourselves, in my opinion. So
I can't tell you how many times you've said that to us.
Yeah.
I know. It's
I'm
the
like-
best, though.
It is. I was like, receiving for us was hard.
yeah,
It was when you drilled into us for like, I feel like it was a concept that we probably stayed on in coaching for longer than anything else.
it's
Giving
huge.
and receiving, yeah.
It's huge because think about receiving, right? It's so vulnerable. We have to open up, and then that's where we let in the love. So many times people will say, I'm not connecting with my partner, and they're terrified of actually being loved. And that's a real deal, right? Because in childhood and a lot of different things, it wasn't safe, and there's a lot of reasons why we don't. But yeah, I mean, receiving is terrifying.
So we talk a lot about like the connection to self first, and then in our relationships. When you're talking to somebody that comes in or that's like on that journey, where's your, this is a really open-ended question, so you can be like, this is a dumb question, Lauren.
No, I will not say that.
Where do you recommend someone starts? Like, let's say they're like, okay, wait, I'm not ready for therapy. I'm not ready for coaching. I'm not ready for any of that. Like, but I know there's a disconnect and I do want to connect better with myself. How do I do that?
I actually love the question.
Okay.
I wrote about it in the book. I think the most perfect place to start is to ask questions, to get curious, right? The fact that you're already saying, is something off?
Yeah.
Is something not right? Am I missing something? Could I receive more? Right? Like the bigger the question, the more questions you ask, the more you listen, the more you get your answer. So I don't think people question enough.
I love that.
I really don't. I don't think they get curious enough.
I love that. And I know when we started coming to it, it's so funny. Like, I look back at my life before you and I'm like, I really didn't question much. Like, I really
I didn't either at first.
I really just kind of led a very like trusted, I guess you could call it like a faith-based life. Like, I just kind of was like, everything is great. Like, what else could there be? Everything's fine. And it's so crazy because now I feel like it's like daily. There's constant questions of like, that just come up in my life where I'm like, do I want this? Do I not want this? What is this feeling? Like, why is this coming up? And it's just constant, like, question-based living, which is something that I love, like, not only in our relationship, but like personally, and then even with our kids and like all, just everything in general. It's so cool to take that question-based living and be like, is this serving me? Is it not? What if I actually tried this?
Yes.
It's getting curious, which I love.
There's no expansion without it.
Yeah.
And think about being able to do that for yourself, but then think about how powerful that is to do with your partner, right? Really being the kind of mirror and the kind of partner that helps you create space for more questions.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't have to be so rigid and solid and attached to a certain storyline or a certain narrative so that someone could be right or wrong, right? There's so much openness and vulnerability to questions.
Yeah.
I'm gonna risk something here.
Oh,
you guys
yes.
can cut it out if you don't like it.
Please, no. We don't cut anything out. Everything's on the table. Here we go. It's too much work.
I found out within myself, not even that long ago, that religion has a part in this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
A really big part in any religion. I think, or any type of subscription to really anything philosophy wise in different ways, right? So I realized growing up that I was taught not to question.
Yes.
And that was heavily implanted in my head. And so there was, it was like, oh yes, I want you to question, and you can question anything, but don't, because this is actually the answer. So it was very, very confusing. And I realized how early on I shut that part of my brain down. And that's a literal thing, right? Your actual critical thinking brain atrophies. And so we just stop asking questions, and I think it's extremely dangerous.
No, I love that. Yeah. I love that you went there, because I was literally just going to say, in our relationship, it was so funny. Earlier on in our relationship, I can go back and think, like, okay, there were so many conversations we had where I was like, no, like, we would talk, and it was like, Matt would be like, have all these questions. He's always been like, I feel like, very curious. And we would have these conversations, and he'd talk to me about things, and I'd be like, no, especially like when it came to religion, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, God is like this, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just so stuck in my way. Yeah, like,
know, right?
And he's like, no, like, really learn, think about it. And I'm like, I don't have to think about it. Like, I just know, Matt. Like, I know.
Everybody's done my thinking for me.
Yes. And I feel like it was like, hold on. I don't know when it was, but we started having conversations where I could sit and be like, wait, let me actually ask myself that question, or let me like step into where you're coming from and see if I really like sit with that. You know what I mean? And be like, do I agree with this? Do I want to go on this journey that you're also going down here as well? And that's brought up some really cool things in our own personal lives. You know what I mean? Where we're sometimes like, we're really unhinged of like, hey, have you ever thought about this? And he's like, you're on this topic again.
Very unhinged, yes.
But at the same time, it's like, wait. And I'm like, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about it. And like, it's actually sits really well with me. Like, I actually really do believe it. Do you know what I mean? And so it's cool, like you were saying, when you have a partner that you can do that, and that allows you to question. Yeah. That was something cool for us that I had never experienced with really any relationship other than the relationship with you and then the relationship with Matt, to have somebody say, hey, have you actually ever thought about this? Or like, have you thought about this? Like, one of the biggest questions you ever asked me in our journey was like, when we sat there, and I remember being so angry with you, and you were like, what's your like view on pornography?
I knew you were going to go there.
Yeah. And you're like, do you think it's bad? And you asked me some of the questions that no one had ever asked me before. And I was like, hold on.
Well, that just seems so matter of fact, right?
Yes.
Like, of course pornography is bad.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Why would you even ask that question?
Yes.
Like, but have you really thought
and
about
you
it?
And you kept saying, well, have you really thought about
it?
it?
Like 3 or 4 sessions to even get past that.
Yeah.
Well,
like
we would go home and we would talk about it.
Which would normally take people 2 years.
Oh, okay, cool. We move fast.
Yes.
There you go.
We just like to talk.
No, but even the question of like, the main question of what you did for us was asking us what we wanted.
Yeah.
In our lives.
Yeah.
And giving us the space to actually sit there and answer. And if we said, I don't know, you were the most frustrating person, because you were like, you're the only one that knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think it's part of that critical thinking brain. I think it's part of that questioning, because it's like, if we don't ask what we want and we just think we know, it actually gets difficult. I get people in all the time that literally cannot answer that question. It's the most difficult question for them to ask.
Yeah, but what I have learned too is cognitively, the second that we say, I don't know, it allows us to move on. So we don't have to sit with it.
Great point.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in asking that question and living this question-based life and starting in this journey, right, of connection to self, it gives your partner space to just be themselves, right? And then we go into like, can you live intuitively? And can you ask yourself what you want every single day and then actually do it?
Yeah.
But we run into it a lot where we see couples that are pushing against, like, I don't agree with what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. But then somebody else is like living the most genuine part of their highest self, their best life, right? And then it gets frustrating for people, because then it causes like this connection that we're trying to create into something that's really like resentful.
Well, it kind of goes even a little farther. It gets this almost feels humorous to me. So see how this feels to you guys. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use a little bit of gender, it's a little bit biased, but it's pretty typical, right?
Yeah.
Typical for girls, right? Women to play a lot of house, right? You guys have girls, you know the difference, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much narrative that as our brain is developing, that we start to create those pathways and all that narrative in our head. And like I said, girls do it in a much more detailed way. And so the reason why I find it a little bit funny is because so many times the husband will come in, or the boy will come in, and they're like really confused, right? They feel confused. They're like, what's happening? She's got all of this is going on, whatever. It feels more complex to them, right?
Okay.
And so it's very interesting when you realize that so many boys grow up with the narrative. I mean, Matt, tell me what you thought when you get married. Like,
Oh, you have to provide for a family.
Okay. Yep. As long as I work and provide.
Yep.
What
Have
else?
kids. The wife's going to take care of the house.
Wife's gonna take care of
right?
that.
Do dishes, clean, trash, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That was all like very front, like top of mind.
Yeah.
Right. But
like in the locker rooms and like with guys, like what do you talk about? Like
Ooh.
what do guys expect going into marriages?
Oh, sex.
Yeah.
Being able to like do it whenever you want.
Yeah.
Right. Not like literally them pleasing you 24/7.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right?
You
Stuff like
become the
that.
king, you get sex, you hopefully have this really hot wife, and
Yep.
that makes you something, right? And that's when their narrative ends.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the reason why I think it's a little funny, it's because it's like so deviously subconscious that a lot of women, they know where the narrative goes beyond that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, now he's gonna romanticize me, and then I'm gonna have kids, and then we have all this narrative after the marriage, right?
Yeah.
Where men are so much more simple. And so the reason why I bring that up is because you talk about the getting curious in the space that we give our partner to be themselves. The reason why I think a lot of people really struggle with this is because the character in their play, in their doll story, in their Barbie story, aka their now husband, who is actually a completely individual being, right?
I like the way you said that.
Is not playing out their narrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason they're mad is because it's not going the way that they played it out in their own head.
Hold on. So tell me the story that a girl thinks a guy should be doing. You kind of said it. You were like, oh, they're going to romanticize me. They're going to do all this stuff, right?
Yeah, we think love. I would say stereotypically,
Yeah.
we've been taught that now we are going to be loved. Now we're going to be valuable. Now we are. We're going to get everything that we didn't have.
I feel like it's like a
more
purpose.
emotional.
Like we
I
have
would
a
say,
purpose.
yeah,
Like,
purpose.
yeah.
I
don't
totally
know. That's
agree.
how
Also
I
want your
feel.
take on this
Yeah.
too. So yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I have a purpose now. Oh, I have like somebody that like is I don't know how to put this other than like in my own brain. Like in how my narrative played out was like I really thought I would get married at 18. We would be so madly in love, like couldn't live without each other.
Yeah.
Like every rom-com you've ever
Like what
seen.
were the Barbies doing?
Like Barbies were just
Yep.
loving
Oh,
each
yeah.
other,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But it's interesting because it matches up a little bit with what you said as far as like husband provides. And like I used to tease all the time, like I felt like I should just, it's almost like the 50s narrative.
Yeah, that's a big
Where
one.
it's like, you're going to come home and I'll have dinner made and the kids will be very like well behaved. And,
Yeah.
and it was like, it's like this unrealistic picture Brady Bunch, like not even Brady Bunch, but like, I'm
You
like
are dating
thinking,
yourself just a tad
I'm
bit,
like,
but yes.
yeah, but I'm like Barbie. Like I'm
Yes.
literally thinking when I played Barbie, it was like my Ken came home, loved on Barbie. She had dinner ready.
Mm-hmm.
We like played, like it was just, we played house and I was just cute and like loved and,
Yeah.
and like adored and all these things. Right. And I could do no
And we
wrong.
went on date night and we went to the ball and we got dressed up.
Yeah.
And there was just, again, we don't really want or desire to get to know the real person in front of us most of the time. It's scary because then we have to lose what is comfortable and familiar to us, which is our own narratives.
Yes.
And so, yeah, to your point, it's why do we get upset? Let me put it personally.
Yeah.
I did the same thing, right? I checked all the boxes, all the things that my mother had shown me, right? Because it's all I really knew. And most people really, this is a huge tip for a lot of people to look at. It's like, what did I believe I was supposed to do when I got married or when I was in a relationship? It's only going to be usually what I saw.
Yeah.
So I played out exactly what my mom had showed me. Maybe I did it even better so that I could be, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And did all the things that, religion or society or whatever those labels were.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why my entire world just blew up, because I was in my own fantasy. I was in my own, that wasn't actually what was happening, because I didn't even want to get to know necessarily who was in front of me. I just wanted him to be who I wanted him to be. So
that was so perfect.
It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, that's so perfect. And it makes so much sense too. And because like our goal right now is to help people create this connection that we're talking about in their relationships.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense that a guy is going to come into this with this locker room mentality.
Yeah.
And a woman's going to come in with this house, or like not housemaid, but like, what were you saying? Playing house mentality.
Yeah.
And then when that doesn't happen, then we end up just pissed.
Yeah,
right?
we're totally pissed.
Well, I think it's kind of like, I don't want to look at you because you're not who I thought you were. Because
Exactly.
that's a narrative a lot of times people say, like, I don't even know who this person is. And it's like, well, you don't know who they were because you never actually took time to get to know them.
Yeah.
And, or you thought you saw what you wanted to see. And the second they showed you anything else, they either didn't want to change for you, which I don't think they should change for you. But you also were just kind of like, wait, I don't even want to look at this because this isn't what I had painted, right?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't real. Hold on. So I don't know you.
Well, and the devious part, right? The part that I keep like laughing with them. Let me give it a little bit more detail. I subconsciously knew what I was doing. Subconsciously, not consciously. And I got everything I wanted. I got the kids. I played out everything that I wanted because, again, I was in my own fairy tale. I sold everybody on the fairy tale that I was living. I sold myself on it.
Yeah.
And looking now, after that all, dismantled, that illusion dismantled, I realized that the disservice I did to my partner was I really trapped him in my narrative. That is a real deal. I really did. I was like, here's all the things you need to be. And I made it a pretty picture, right? It was like, we're going to be, this is what it's all going to look like. And he said several times to me certain things, and I just ignored it. I'm like, what do you mean you don't want any more kids? Of course you want more kids, right? Like, we want 6. I want 6, and what do you mean you don't, whatever it is, right? And I just like completely dismissed it. Yeah. And subconsciously, because I was like, that's just not the way it goes. Right? You must not know, because this is exactly how it's supposed to go in our story. So that was a hard pill to swallow.
That's so crazy, because you saying that, I realized how much I did that in our relationship before I came and saw you, which is so crazy, because I would say all the time to Matt, like, what do you mean? Like, I gave you the perfect life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I set everything up. You could do whatever the hell you wanted. Are you kidding me?
You don't even have to do anything.
Yeah. Like,
I'll do it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wait, like, I did everything I could. I even sometimes now catch myself saying that, like, there are so many things that, like, I have done to make sure that you can do everything that you want to do. But it's like, hold on. Is that really what he wants? Because it's like, no, that's just my painting of what everything should look like, or how. And it's funny going back, because I'm like, oh, it does feel very like the house.
Yeah.
It is. Like, I was like, holy cow, I was playing house. Like, I was just checking off things that I thought society needed, like, wanted me to do. And I was just almost living like robotically. Just like, here we go. Okay. It's like, that one movie. Oh my gosh. What's that movie that has, we went and saw it. Oh my gosh. What's it called? Don't Worry, Darling. Did you ever see that movie?
I didn't see that.
Tawnya, you're a movie guru. You have to watch it like tonight. Okay. It's so good. It's called Don't Worry, Darling.
It's like 50s setting.
Oh, okay.
Like couples where the man goes to work and the wife plays house. But it's all a simulation at the very end of the movie.
I love movies
so
like that. Yes.
Good.
Okay,
and she realizes something's off. It has the One Direction guy in it that everyone loves. Harry Styles.
Oh, okay.
It's really good.
Okay,
so go watch it. Like, you'll really like it. It's so good. Don't Worry, Darling. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, you talk about the pain of like why somebody would come and talk to you or us, right? Yeah. People get to this point where they realize that this story is not playing out the way that they wanted to. And then this pain comes in.
Yep. And
this
and
is
let's be real, it's the disconnect from my story, not the real.
not that somebody else is causing me pain.
Yeah, exactly.
The disconnect from my story. Okay,
Yep.
talk about that for a sec.
Well, it just, I mean, the pain comes in anytime we disconnect from like ourselves or the comfort of our story or the known, right? It gets uncomfortable. It gets painful when we're not, I mean, we take it a step farther and realize that our whole nervous system and our whole subconscious is wired to play out this story. And the reason it's wired to play out this story is because the reason we played the story in Barbies is because we either subconsciously we saw it being done, we watched it in a movie, we watched our parents, all these. So we crafted it when we were young, and it is literally painful because everything is kind of wired to be that way. And so you start feeling like you don't know yourself. You start shorting out. You don't know how you're supposed to feel because you've already wired yourself to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets painful when we disconnect from some of those pain points that we had when we were kids anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where you have changed my life individually. Lauren can speak for herself, but this pain that caused us to sit in your chair, right? Helped you teach us, helped us learn how to recognize our emotions.
Yes, huge.
And that was the game changer for us.
Yeah.
It was the game changer when it came to like being able to communicate in our relationship, but then also be able to like self-analyze and understand what's going on for us.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the driver for this is what we talk about all the time, of like this high energetic frequency of sex a lot of the times, right? So for us, it was porn. That's why we came and sat in your seat. For a lot of people, it could be like physical abuse. For a lot of people, it's somebody cheated, right? That was your story.
Yep.
And what I have learned is that because on our emotion scale that you've beautifully shared with us, that we've taken and just ran with, right?
As you should.
Below guilt and shame are less than pain, right? And this is where a lot of people that we've seen have come and sat in our chair to be able to address their shame and their guilt.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the emotion scale a little bit.
We should.
Because I think that it's so important for connection in a relationship. Because if there's a couple that comes and says, hey, we're not having enough sex, or I'm frustrated about that.
Or we're not connecting.
We're not connecting at all.
Yeah. We're in two different worlds.
Mm-hmm. Right. We could talk about like all the 4 types of intimacy that we want. Right. But until we address like the emotional side of intimacy, then nothing changes, and that's what we've seen. Is that kind of what you see as well?
Oh, 100%. I don't believe there is any connection without being in the same vibration, without being able to connect emotionally.
Wow.
So there's even dating advice out there that says if you're going to want to connect, first of all, don't just like sit and try and logically see if you can connect, right? Like, what are the red flags? Do you know yourself? Like you could try and protect yourself that way.
Stay on that.
Right?
I love that.
And the truth is if you can do something together that causes a similar emotion, right? So if we do something we're both afraid of, right? Immediately we know we're going to connect.
Yeah.
So logically trying to work our way through, we're probably selecting people out way too fast because we don't really know what it's like to actually connect with them, because you have to be in the same emotional state. So you bring sex up, so great, right? Because so many, what's the common thing we hear, right? I'm not in the mood.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's not in the mood. He's not in the mood. I'm just not there tonight. Whatever it is, right? Like it's this like, because so many people come in and think that it's supposed to look a certain way,
like their story that they had planned out.
Great point. Yeah.
Sure.
It's like or they've had great sex once, and it's I can't perform this certain way, right? I'm not there to be the, to be this character, right? And so much of it is performance based. But what we really miss is the vulnerability of what sex looks like on every emotion, what connection looks like, what conversation, what dance we actually have in every emotion. And I think that's where we really miss all the good stuff. So it's being raw in our emotion, knowing the emotion that we have and actually connecting with, being able to communicate it is huge. Knowing where you're at and then seeing if your partner will meet you there.
Okay, but I think that you have like a fast track to figure out if you guys can connect, if you and your couple can connect emotionally.
I love that.
Right?
Fast track is the best way to put that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's not just fast track in connection. I think it's fast track in communication. Right? When I can tell you how I feel
Yeah.
It is totally different than me trying to tell you my narrative in my head. Here's what I'm thinking. And here's like, we try and logically try and connect with somebody and get them to communicate with us or connect with us. If I can tell you how I feel, we're there immediately.
Yeah.
And it's so fast.
I love that.
Yeah.
Which is so funny because like
Go for it.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh,
I remember like you telling us that, like, if you just communicate based off of emotion, and I was like, it's so hard. Like, oh my
So
gosh.
hard.
And that's like, I don't know how else to communicate anymore. And it's not just in like our relationship. Like, I find myself doing it with like my kids or like with people that I run into or friendships or family members. It's like those words or those emotions come up in those, like, I don't know how to have another conversation other than using those words. And sometimes I feel like the other person's like, are you speaking a different language? Like, because I think a lot of times people just don't understand. I know I didn't for a really long time. Like, I didn't even know what emotion I was in. I thought there was like happy, sad, like pissed off, and that was like pretty much it.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Well, I think you bring up a great point because we have guarded ourselves. Our ego and our brain and our narrative is protecting us usually from feeling emotion because it's extremely vulnerable. Yeah. And let's be real, our parents and our parents before us, they didn't know how to actually sit with us. They didn't know how to talk about it. Yeah. They were in survival in their own right? Mm-hmm. So I think that this generation, you guys' generation, I think that's why it was so fun to watch you guys. Everything was so much faster. The generation coming up behind you guys, even faster.
Yes.
So understanding and being real and having the safety to communicate your emotion and be able to feel that vulnerability is, to your point, it's no joke, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to stay in my head and I'm going to keep myself really in my narrative and really like, I know all of these things, but I have to be vulnerable and I have to drop down and actually feel. And it's interesting because I actually find a lot of women that are really like this.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times women are like, no. Like, I know I'm very emotional. I'm a very emotional person. And I'm like, I think you are, but it's like I said, you know, two emotions, right? You know, like happy and sad. And those are the only emotions you know. You don't know anything else. For me, it was like anger. Like, I didn't really know how to express anger or like even what that looked like. Do you know what I mean? It made me so uncomfortable. And it was like the second that I was able to kind of allow myself to even get angry, it was like, hold on. And not look at it as a negative thing, which was something that was so cool that was taught to like me from you, which was like, it's not a bad thing. And I was like, hold on,
no, we need
let me look at this. Do you know what I mean? And then moving forward, and even like anger in our relationship or even on Matt's side, you know, like there were times where he would get angry and I was just like, oh, I hate this. But now I'm like, hold on. Yeah. No, I don't look at it as much as a negative thing where I'm like, okay, you're pissed about something. Like, let's figure out what you're mad about. It's, you know what I mean? Like, and am I also angry about it too?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I learned too about emotions is that once you can address why you actually love this person that you're sitting next to or chose to be with, it's no matter what emotions, you choose love, right? So if you're angry, and it goes back to what you said, like, and it was the best conversation we ever had coaching, because you're like, you can have mad sex, like you can have sad sex, like why not have sex when you're like feeling really guilty for something? Totally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you can match but the thing that we did learn and that I love teaching is that it does take somebody to be competent enough to go down to these lower emotions, to be able to cope and to be able to be empathetic with somebody.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that? I love the idea of getting in a vulnerable state together, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's not just sitting across from somebody in a therapy session or a coaching session.
No.
It's like, what can we go do on date night that we're both so fucking scared of?
Great
right?
point. It's why you guys' conversation cards are so powerful.
Oh, there we go. Pitch the conversation cards. I love it. Yeah.
No, for real. Let's just pitch it for a second, because the truth is what you're really doing is you're saying, can we meet in this vulnerable place?
Yeah.
Will you meet me here? Right? Like, I'm going to ask the question, and you don't have to, right? You can just, you can avoid it. You can answer it, the way you normally would. But if you can really drop into this question and meet me here, we're going to experience something together.
Yeah.
So totally magical.
Dang, I didn't even think about it that way. That's cool.
But that's also so interesting, because I think a lot of times people ask us, like, what was so different in your guys' experience, like coaching with you? Mm-hmm. And I'm always like, well, we got to do it together, right? Like, we got to do it together. We got to see each other. Like, we got to hear each other's stories and all these things. And as you're saying, I'm like, hold on. It was the connection that I felt listening to even Matt sharing like childhood things or things that came up in meditation or.
And then your childhood self could actually like, oh my gosh, we could meet in this. I remember feeling some of these things.
For sure. Yeah. And also just like seeing him in such a different light, but it was a different connection. It was like as a as like a 31, 32-year-old woman, I could look at him and be like, oh my gosh, wait, I see you as an 8-year-old, or I see you as a 10-year-old. And it was a different connection that I got to have with my spouse that was like, hold on, I haven't ever had this connection with anybody else. I've never met somebody at a different age and be like, wait, I also felt that way. Or like, wait, I want to just give you a love because I can't believe you did feel that way. And now I see you in a different setting now. But it is that connection. And I think that was what was so cool in the space that you provided for us, was that that's not given very often. And it's not like received very easily a lot of times. Like, I don't think people know how to do it. And so having a space to do it in was like, I mean, we've said it over and over again, like life-changing, because it gave us the opportunity to really get vulnerable with each other and have somebody be there to like allow space in order to do it, where there was no judgment, where you were just kind of like, oh, that happened? Okay, cool. Like, let's talk about it. And I was over here like, had that just gotten dropped on me, like, I don't know how I would have responded. And like, hold on. Like, and it was cool to watch your mirror of like, okay, wait, how is she responding? And what is she saying? What kind of space is she holding?
Yeah, that's so good, right? Like, hold on, pause, don't move. Right? The idea is can you meet her there? Can you feel him there? Don't move from this space, because this is your opportunity to actually connect with him. Yeah. And so there is a presence that has to happen in that. And in that is extremely vulnerable. And I mentioned that women are in their heads a lot. I think the reason why I mentioned that is because culturally or through evolution, and I know you work with a lot of men as well. Yeah. And I know when you came in there, you tapped into emotion quick. Yeah. Right. And you could go into some of those very deep emotions that are terrifying to actually go into, by the way. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. For you, it was a little bit more comfortable, I think, in some ways. I live there. Because you live there. Mm-hmm. And you can hide there as well. People will do that as well. Yep. But, you know, where I was taught to always play out this fairy tale and this narrative in my head, the same thing was happening with my spouse. Is I was terrified to go into some of these dark and wrong places, right? Like, I was terrified to go into my own fear, right? I was taught to not fear anything, and I was taught to go into my own guilt and shame. And so I think so many men are, because emotion has been suppressed for so long for men, it's kind of known that women will sit around in the kitchens, whether it's the 50s or wherever it is, right? Like, women will talk to other women. For the most part, we allow emotions because we're so emotional, right? Like, we've already been tied to that anyways, which, you know, it is part of the feminine. But to bring men into this, the power of going into your emotions and holding that space, and being that safe place to honor how you're feeling, and then really invite someone into that space. I think a lot of men don't realize, but are moving into this space of realizing how powerful it is.
Okay, it is powerful, but I'll tell you something just super frustrating that I want to talk to the women about in the room, is that I don't think you guys are as emotional as you think you are.
We're not. We just said that.
That's what we said.
We both just said that.
Sure. But societally, right? You two are beautiful and fantastic and very emotional. Sure. Whatever. Shut up, Matt. But no, I'm kidding.
No, we're saying that we're not emotional.
But what I'm saying is that men are now told, and because I just got back from a men's retreat. Perfect. Right? Men are now told that they need to show up emotionally for women.
Yes.
And hold space emotionally for women.
Yes.
Right? But the subconscious, the story that a man has in his head, is saying, if I do that, I will come across weak to this woman.
And women they'll believe that as well.
They will believe it.
There's still narrative around that.
But I think that if we're talking surface level, or talking like this is the story that plays out in most every relationship, it's real, because to get to the level that us three are at right now is very difficult.
Yeah.
Where it's like, so we're talking logic, right? That's where most relationships are at. And so how is it that a man that hasn't done this work, but knows that being vulnerable, or listens to this podcast and says, okay, cool, I'm going to go be vulnerable, right? Approaches his wife and it isn't received.
And she's like, you're a pussy. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, because that's what I mean. The story. I think women will buy into that.
Or it's very like unattractive. Like, I've heard a lot of women be like,
and maybe I'm confusing it, but
no, I think you're not. I don't think so. I think you're asking the right question. So how do men get into a safe place within themselves to stay connected to that emotion, and therefore have it be powerful, right? I think it goes, if we circle all the way back to the idea of knowing yourself, I think is the key, right? Knowing how powerful truthful and literally powerful. An emotion is 5,000 times more powerful than a thought. That has been measured. Heart Math Institute. It's a very big. So when you walk into a room, you're feeling somebody way more than you're like listening to them most of the time, right?
Okay.
Most people are like really trying to decide if they can connect with somebody way more by feeling than they are the thought. So to answer your question, I would go into the space of, can you recognize, first of all, that truth comes from emotion, like being able to communicate your emotion, being able to be that vulnerable, being able to hold the space within yourself.
Yeah.
And know that your partner might be very uncomfortable with their own vulnerability. They might be very uncomfortable with the mirror of being that vulnerable.
Wow. Okay,
Because to
cool.
your point,
Yep.
I think the feminine energy is, the very definition is emotional and spiritual, but men and women have feminine and masculine. It's literally different parts of our brain. So I do find a lot of men come in who are craving and stepping into even a pure emotion, if that makes sense, because they haven't like done so much narrative around emotion. Women will get together and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so mad, and I feel so sad, and like it's like, okay, but like, or I feel so guilty for this, and we'll talk so much about it, but sometimes we miss the actual like feeling of it, where I find men can get there sometimes a little faster.
Which I think where you're coming from, and tell me if you agree with this or not, but if I'm thinking of myself, and like when you've met me in an emotion that I'm uncomfortable with, like let's say it's like vulnerability, or like let's say like you're in guilt and you come to me and you're really guilty or you're really shameful about something, and I'm like, I don't really know how to take this on, right? My head is trying to come up with some kind of a story as to like why you were doing that. Yeah, well, why you were doing that, or like why you would feel that way, or like what I need to now be doing to make sure that like you're okay. Like I kind of just I feel like for me, I didn't know how to just be like, oh, it's okay that he's just feeling that. Like I don't actually need to do anything. I just need to like hold space in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And let go of the like internal dialogue of like, well, why did he do it? Yeah, like something's wrong. Hold on, like I gotta like fix this problem.
I love that you're going there, because this is like the recipe, right? I'll open up. These men will open up to their wives, and then it's, well, how do I fix this? Because this is the masculine energy, the feminine,
which
right?
is so funny because it's flipped, right? Because every man has really been taught this as well. I'm supposed to fix this. So it is funny that happens.
Yeah, and so, but I have heard, and in reading The Way of the Superior Man, it's a beautiful book.
Nice.
That, and we've even seen it in our relationship, and I love it, but I want to know your perspective of it, is that women just want men to open up to them, right? Whether or not we know the emotions that we're going through, whether or not it's just like, hey, I've had a really hard day, and me being quiet isn't because of you, it's because of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I would even say like you came back from this men's retreat and you were pretty quiet after you got back, and I was like, and there was a disconnect there for you and I kept being like, you're just not talking to me, right? And it's like, and you're like, well, I did talk to you, but like you told me about some of the retreat, right? But it was like there was a disconnect there of like I wasn't feeling any connection to you in the conversation, as far as like I wanted to be like, well, what did you get out of it, and like where are you at like in the experience that you had? Like I wanted to know that instead of like kind of the stories and the things that you did. It was like I wanted just a level deeper of connection there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then it's I mean, it's like the two-way street thing goes, right? Because it's like if I say something and it doesn't work for them, right? We have clients that do this all the time, and it's like, well, I said what I needed to say, and she's like, well, it wasn't enough, right?
Yeah, I feel like nine times out of 10 that is a common thing in conversations.
And so it's like this weird, and I'm genuinely like, you're my coach, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to figure this out for the masses, because if a woman says, hey, I want you to hold space for me emotionally, for you to get more sex, right? Physical.
Okay. Then
what does that look like genuinely? Because I feel like the physical, like if we're talking the 4 types of intimacy, physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual, you said that the feminine is spiritual and emotional, right? So masculine is physical and intellectual.
Yeah.
So how are we learning this conscious relationship that we're creating? How are we learning to be both? Right.
Well, I love that you kind of like wrapped that into the answer all in one point, because what we talked about first was that you were holding a space in a masculine energy to say, how do I fix this, right? Intellectually, how do I like fix this?
Yeah.
Because the feminine in all of us, right? Holding space is a phrase that we all use because we know what that means.
Right.
What it really means is that I stay connected to me, and I stay connected to love, which is ultimately just connected to me, right? I don't try and fix it. So you're asking that from the man's perspective. And the second we make it personal, the second we make it about us, the second we think somehow that this emotion has really anything to do with me, is what starts to disconnect us, or what starts the brain and the ego to start to create the narrative around. And that's where the disconnect comes in. When we can't hold an emotion, which is just an energy, it's just a depth, right? And we can just slow it all down, and we can just say, I'm just going to be here with you. I'm just going to listen. Most people are not listening. They don't have the space, right? Again, I'm trying to fix it. It's like, there's nothing wrong. And I think that's the biggest part of it is so many times we've got these emotions labeled as wrong, and that we got to fix something. And it's like, wait, this is an energy in my body that I've been holding, that I am just tapping into, and I'm probably releasing. And I think one of the biggest things with emotion is recognizing that, again, most of these sensations in our body, most of these triggers, most of these emotions, they've been held there for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask people a lot. I'll say, what do you do if a 4-year-old runs into the closet and they are feeling something? And every parent has a different answer. Right? Oh, I just wait till they come out. Or maybe I'm going to go knock on the door. I'm going to go talk them through it, or whatever it is. And the answer, not right or wrong, a really good answer as far as the energy in our body goes, just sit with them. Just sit with them. You don't have to fix anything, right? They are having an experience. They need to figure those things out. Yeah. Do you know how to just be with them? Without trying to do anything, labeling it, making it right or wrong, putting a bunch of narrative around it. So how do men do this? How do women do this? First and foremost, I have to be comfortable with myself. Yeah. If I'm not comfortable with fear, if I'm not comfortable with guilt, I'm going to try and avoid yours because it makes me uncomfortable, right? So I've got to be comfortable with myself in these emotions, and be able to kind of go into my own vibration of that, and then not try and fix it. And love is space. Love is actually just being with somebody. It's not really anything to do. It's just listening and being with them. Yeah. So I think we do ourselves a disservice to not realize how easy it is.
That's amazing.
We just looked at each other like, damn, Tawnya.
That was so sick. Truthfully, and understanding that their triggers, all of the things that they're getting angry, sad, mad about, that's not your fault.
Not yours.
I love that.
It was interesting. I'm like bringing TV shows into this. No one knows why, but I am. We just got done watching The Perfect Couple on Netflix. Have you seen that?
I loved it.
I loved the part where she says to him when they're in like her office and he's trying to get her back, and she's like, guilt is not transferable. Or she says something, and I
didn't catch that line.
And I was like, stop it. And and essentially he was trying to guilt her into staying like in it. And she was just like, unfortunately, your guilt is not transferable to me. Like it doesn't transfer there. And I was like, oof, like so that was hard. So good. And like their relationship ends up being fine. Do you know what I mean? But like in that moment, it was like, hold on. Like she was like, hey, I can't feel what you're feeling because it doesn't transfer to me. Like I don't feel guilty about the same thing you're feeling guilty about. Therefore, you're not going to make me feel guilty about it. So
so good.
But that was interesting because it was like she did hold actually pretty good space in that moment of like they got angry and they fought there. But she was just like, listen, I'm not going to feel guilty for what you're trying to get me to feel guilty about.
And if we take it a step farther, I'm not going to carry this. And because I love you, I want to be here with you as you're processing it. Yes. Right? As the second my ego doesn't feel like I have to like defend myself, which is the the second you're defending yourself that you're in ego. The second you have to jump in and make something right or do whatever it is, you're in your head. Yeah. Right? So yeah, I mean I love
interesting
that.
Going back. I'm like I may have to go back and like rewatch that show. I love the part
where she walks away because of the ick. Did you see that?
No, I'm thinking of a different show.
Oh, you are?
Yes. We're talking about two different ones. but did love that one.
We talked about last time.
We talked about this one on
Nobody Wants This.
Nobody Wants This.
Yeah.
Which, yes, because I told Matt. No, because I told Matt that opened up a can of worms for me because I always wondered like what my real greatest fear was. And it was when she says that I'm scared to be emotionally dependent on somebody that can't love me back. And I was like,
And then
That's
we've seen,
That
love.
vulnerability was
Yeah.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So amazing. No, I'm talking about, it has Nicole Kidman in it and somebody else. It's like a murder mystery.
Oh, okay.
What? It's real good.
Okay,
But
I love that.
anyways,
Okay,
that
but
was
then-
another
Good
one.
line though.
Yeah.
And then, but at the other end of that scene is
Where
the
he's
guy
like-
saying, I can handle you.
Yo, it was the best.
Right.
He's like, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to push me away. I know you like,
Yeah.
and it was because she shared that. That's the really important part, right? Is because she
Beautiful,
knew
yeah.
herself, she could share it. And then love will hold that sacred. Love will not weaponize it, right? Love will say, oh, you shared a vulnerability, you shared a pattern, you shared something with me, and because I love you, I will now hold that sacred. And in doing that, I now know when that happens, and I want to hold space for you.
Yeah.
Right. So
beautiful.
there's a huge part of that knowing yourself. It's the reason why that's where we start, because so many times relationships will come in and they believe that the relationship, like I said, we talked about, is the narrative as kids. We believe the relationship's going to now give us what we need and want.
Yeah.
And so we start to blame our partner. And in that, we lose ourselves, right? And then we can't even teach people or communicate what we need or want. We just start saying, you're not giving it to me. But it's like, well, do you even know what that is? And
can
how
I
you
give it to
access
me?
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Dang, Tanya's amazing. This is so cool. I do want to touch on a little bit of like your meditative journey a little bit.
Oh, I was thinking about that.
Because look at me.
I was feeling you when we were talking about going to his younger self. That's the image that went in my head, is how beautifully you were able to do that.
Yeah. I always skip past this, right? But it's the thing that helped me the most. And I think that it's what society needs in a whole. And especially the men that I work with.
Nice.
Because they don't understand that they can actually start to listen to themselves and actually heal themselves. So yeah, you taught us how to meditate, and it was the most frustrating thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because we laid down on her couch.
You gotta love Matt's ego.
Yeah.
What is this about?
Yeah. Lay down on her couch on your lap, very vulnerable. I was
Yeah.
like, the fuck are we doing?
Fair.
She puts headphones on us and turns on this weird music.
For reference, I'm touching your like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
did
know what
touch.
you're doing.
I want to feel the energy.
You did
in your
touch
head.
our
Yeah.
I'm
heads.
telling
Yes,
you,
our
like, this is how I perceived it
Yes,
the very
I hear
first
you.
time. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It's true.
And because I had never like been even dabbled in this world or
Yeah.
like knew what it was. And you're like, hey, just tell me what comes up for you. And I'm like, that's the most frustrating comment
Sure.
I've ever heard. So the first time nothing happened.
Yeah.
Because I was so in my head.
Exactly.
So I went home, dark room, and tried to do it by myself. And then I finally was like, okay, cool, I got something.
Yeah.
Since then, it has been like the number one thing that I teach people to be able to receive answers for themselves.
Yes.
Right?
There was a lot more that went into it for you that she did teach, like landscapes
I
and
know,
all of
but
that.
I was just
Okay.
telling the very surface
Okay, I'm
level
like,
story,
you had to
yeah.
give her a little bit more credit than that. The first
Yeah.
time, yes, you were frustrated, but then I feel like
I'm
you
like,
had
here's some of the things you can look for and places you can go.
And I feel like
Because-
once that
yeah.
happened, you were like, wait, hold on. And then it was like so cool to watch you outside looking in and the cool things that you uncovered.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that my question is more like, why this for people? Like, why is this so important for people to understand? Because truthfully, without it, right, we could just be talking about emotions. We could just be talking about logic, and we could just be talking about staying married.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's not what we do.
Yeah. Great
So.
point. Why meditation? It started out for me because, again, I grew up religiously and I grew up with prayer, right? So the idea is I always had these very scripted prayers. You know, here's the order of it. There is so much beauty in that. But to most people's point, I don't really know where the answer is, right? Like, or I don't what comes next. And some people will get little things here and there. I'm not saying that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I don't believe, and this is a very Eastern thing. It's funny that we are bringing it into a very Western culture because we are stereotypically a little bit more ego-based. So the idea of listening and getting into that space is one of the most powerful places you can go to your point. And there's so many layers to why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Listening is so big, right? We're not just listening for words. When we talk about listening in that space, because the idea is that we're quiet, right? So physically we're quiet.
Present. Yeah.
And we're present. But what does listening actually mean? And there's a very, there's all the clairvoyance ideas, right? Sometimes we can see things, which is listening, it's seeing, right? Or sometimes we can hear actual words. Sometimes we get smells. You know, some people will smell. No matter what sense is our strongest, that's usually what comes in to guide us into this space, which if we just stay in the body, if we don't even get very mystical, it gets past the conscious mind, because the conscious mind is there to protect us, and it wants to protect us from any of these traumas and these subconscious things that we want to get to. So meditation is the perfect practice to say to your mind, to your ego, we're safe. Everything's quiet. And we allow that letting go of that conscious mind, and we start to really let the subconscious bring forward. And subconscious is not the same thing as conscious. It's not, it looks very abstract. Yeah. Right. So sometimes it just looks like color. Sometimes it looks like pictures. Sometimes it's just this memory that comes in. And so it's one of the most powerful tools. And it's the reason why I think you're saying this is because we are 95% subconscious.
I forgot that statistic.
Yeah. Cool. And so we are walking around thinking we're making all these conscious choices, and we're not. Right? We are still little kids. We're still all the wiring in the program. We're still trying to protect ourselves most of the time. And so meditation is one of the most beautiful places for us to get past the consciousness and allow us to move into the subconscious, which is going to be, and I mean, I don't know, I think you should share a little bit about you actually went into certain memories.
Yeah.
And in doing that, again, whether you want to get mystical about it or not, because there's a lot that we could do there as well. Let's talk about being curious, right? The universe is incredible. But if you get into those subconscious memories, you can literally walk around in places as your higher self.
Yeah.
And be able to heal and do whatever you want in those spaces. So that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that, I mean, what you're talking about, I've shared the story, like multiple stories on our podcast of like meditations and stuff that have come up for us. One of the biggest ones for me, though, I'll share really quick, was the first time I ever watched porn.
Yeah.
So when I was able to meditate, and Lauren was in the room, Tanya's in the room, beautifully holding space for me. I was able to meditate and go to that 10-year-old kid and be in the same spot, be on the same computer. And I even remember, and yeah, I've shared the story again, before, but I even remember as that 10-year-old kid looking and feeling like this something, and looking out the window and feeling like someone was there.
100%.
And in this meditation, it was actually me. It was my 30-year-old self that had gone back and been like, because the thing is that like all of our traumas, right? And all of the pain that we've been through, we can't rewrite those in our minds. And we talk about going on healing journeys, right? And I think that there's an acceptance first. And I think that there's the realization that what happened to you is going to help you in your life. And then knowing that I was the only one that could have held space for that 10-year-old kid at 30 years old. Yeah. Right.
Because you only got shame and guilt from the adults and the people around you, right? The mirror that's the reason why you hid it for so long. Right. Because they taught you it was something to hide. Right. So yeah, you had to go back and really give yourself permission to love yourself in that space. It's interesting you talk about not rewriting. I think that's a little bit up for debate. Cool. Yeah. I think if the other thing that meditation does is it allows us to create more neuroplasticity. And so you can rewire things.
I love that.
Literally, you can rewire it. And so the more time you spend in meditation, the more you, if I were to even kind of bring a religious aspect in it, for me, like it was like, there is a very real like atonement that can happen. There's like this love, there's this healing that can actually happen. And I bet you can almost not even feel what you did feel before. I bet you that memory has completely shifted for you in certain ways. I bet you have rewritten it.
I'll have to look at that. Yeah. Because I think that my understanding of what you're saying is that I've removed the judgment from the shame and the guilt that I had of myself. Yeah. Right. So I guess, you're rewriting what the story was for you.
You can almost take it a little bit farther, right? You could go into that space and you could hold that kid, right? You can like love on him. You can start to like shift the memory even.
Beautiful.
That's like, oh wait, I felt supported and I felt loved, and this is how I felt loved. And it'll make it almost impossible when you do it and you stay with it to remember what it was before, because it will shift the actual memory in your head. So that gets really fun.
We'll have to play with that. I love that actually.
See, and I'm so opposite. Like, I don't go to my past as much as I go to like my higher self. Like
you do go high. Yeah.
I love hanging out with her. And so, and I remember like if we talk religion, it was like for me when I first had that first like glimpse of my higher self, I was like, who is this person? I love her. I think I told you about it. I was like, I think it's Heavenly Mother, just going off of my like religious background. And the more I sat about, and I remember like Googling like images, like I was like determined to figure out who this was, like hell bent, determined. And then it was like, hold on, that was me. And I now know that. Do you know what I mean? And like just knowing the like way that I felt, like you were talking about with meditation, like just the magnetic pull I had towards this being in my meditation, and like just I even wrote down in my journal, I remember being like, I don't ever want her to leave me. And like just knowing that now, of being so unaware of who that was, and then having this like light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, that's me. And now she comes all the time. Like I now where I made it kind of more aware, I was like, wait, this is her. And she comes all the time now that I like recognized her. And I love that.
Think about the message that came in there, right? I never want her to leave me is the perfect way to start to recognize that I am the only person that never leaves me.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the person to listen to, right? I am my own best friend. I am love. I am the connection. So there's just so much to that space of saying, oh, wait a minute. I am who I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, and also just that's who I want that connection so badly to that higher self. So like I have everything I need to connect to her. I just need to almost just be aware of it. Like she's just right here. I just have to kind of like almost like blink, and it's like, no, she's right there. You're just not aware, right? She's like kind of like, hey, like just notice me, and once you do, I promise everything will fall into place. And I feel like for me that's what needed to happen. I just wasn't aware that she was just with me no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And time's such an illusion. So it is kind of the brain will do very interesting things to take us out of the present moment. So even saying I'm going to my higher self sometimes is a little bit of a trick to say I'm not already my higher self. And I think that's the coolest part about, I think, where you went is in that moment in your past, which by the way is literally going into deep vibration. It's the reason why you could go so deep into your past, because you can go into, you can call it shame or guilt, but it is energy, right? So the fact that you could drop that deep is the reason why you can go into your past that way. You've always been taught to go high, right? And so going back into your storyline, you were your higher self.
Yeah.
In this present moment.
Yeah.
And then when we recognize that, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not searching for anything. I'm here, right? It's right here in this present moment. So in both cases, it's such a great way of recognizing being able to look at ourselves and know who we are. And that's where that self-love comes in. That's where that value comes in. The more let's just say the testament to, again, how fast you guys moved. I'll just tell you, most people, first of all, practicing meditation is years. I mean, I started practicing like 15 years ago. And you're like, I'm frustrated that I didn't get there the first or second time. Let's just be real, right? Like most people are like, I've practiced many times, right? It is a very, I don't want to say difficult, but it takes some presence and some awareness. And so being able to get into those spaces in meditation is a way for us to get into some of those highs and those lows, but it's all really right here. So
do you do that with everybody you work with?
Yes, I won't do it without it for the most part, unless somebody has a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because we can swim in our narrative for a long time.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. For the rest of our lives. And so when I even meet with somebody at the very beginning, I will ask them, do you believe there's more than what we can see? Yeah. And I word it like that so that it can be kind of like abstract and spiritual and all of these things, because I want to see what comes up for somebody, because I don't really, my preference to work with people is not, I don't want to stay in their own narrative. I don't want to stay in there. I want them to actually move to the creator that they are of their world and have the kind of choices that they want. They can create anything they want. And and they can't do that usually without getting into a quiet space of all things are possible. And that's what happens in meditation. Anything is possible in there.
I love that.
Yeah, you once said, you were like, I believe that world is more real than this one that we live in. Yeah, I love that. I've stolen that. I say that all the time because it's true.
When messages and things come in there, I'm like, oh, I was in my head before. This is actually what's real.
I'm like, that's truth. Yeah. I'm like, we say that all the time. Like, people like, I don't know. I sound crazy. I'm like, no, tell me right now, because that's truth for me. Like, that's legit. So
yeah,
I totally agree.
Okay, so what would you say? A couple more questions, right? And then we'll let you go. What would you say to a couple that's kind of in a frustrated like spot in their relationship? Let's say they're not at that pain yet, but they're just kind of frustrated with like their intimate life, like where they're at. They don't really know how to connect or talk. Like, what would you say to them?
Get your conversation cards.
Okay.
No, seriously. Start talking, right? Start asking questions. Don't, well, I mean, obviously everybody processes differently. A lot of people will stay so internal that they get trapped in their own internal world, and they just start assuming everybody should know what it is externally, right? So so many times we get trapped in our own narratives, in our own frustrations, in our own stories, in our own lack, right? There's just a lot of things that come up that start that process of separation. Yeah. So I think that if you can feel that there is something more, there is. And I think you're already on your journey the second you get that. Anybody listening to this, anybody listening to you guys is already on their journey, right? They're already asking questions, or they wouldn't be listening to you. So I think getting curious, back to that, I think is far too underrated. Questions are, I think it was Elon Musk. I saw him, I don't know why it's coming up, but he was sitting there getting interviewed, and he was talking about, like the big picture of like the universe and the collective consciousness. And he said, I actually think he was talking about aliens. I think is what was actually happening. Even better, right? So I'll never forget what he said, because he just said, the problem is we as a species right now are not asking the right questions. And so therefore we can't communicate the way. And I was just like, that's what's happening in our daily lives all the time. So I get trapped in a question just as much as, so if we don't keep asking questions, we'll create our own traps really fast, because the brain will answer. It's meant to, it's meant for narrative. So if we ask a question and we don't get into meditation, or we stay in the one question, the brain will just find evidence of it, of that, whatever that belief was. And so, so staying curious, asking big questions, getting into the space where all things are possible, to the meditation question, and also to building something more, or shifting in your marriage, no matter what pain point you're at. Yeah. It's a matter of you have to first create the space. There's something more, and I think far too many people don't do that.
Wow, they just for themselves or in their relationships.
They just think this is what it is, and they don't. They just get trapped, and there's so many people just like sleepwalking is what it looks like. When the people talk about being awake, there's just a very real feeling of, I don't know. That's the beauty of this life, right? That's the most, I think, faithful statement sometimes we can even ask ourselves. Because the second I think I know, I hold on to a narrative that keeps me stuck. So saying I don't know and constantly being curious, whether it's within ourselves or our relationship, allows for growth. I would say.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay, and not to put you on the spot, and you might have already answered it in this last question, but like, and every time I get asked this on a podcast, I'm like, does my answer change? But what would be like your message to the world?
Such a great question. That we are the creators of it.
Beautiful. That's amazing.
I think and that we are in no lack. There is, I am, I'll give you a little tool that I think is really incredible. And that is, there are literal vibrations that we can get to just by asking ourselves like 4 questions. The first one is, I can't, is a extremely low vibration that we experience as kids for the most part, right? Like there are things we can prove as a kid that we can't do. right? And so so many times in our head we're wired with I can't. Anybody that says I can't is in a very childlike, it's usually their inner child that's talking.
Yeah.
Because the truth is we know that you can actually do just about anything,
Yeah.
right? So the next one is let's see, I have to. I think it's this like I'm getting up for the gym and I have to do something. Like I have to do this, I have to do that. It's kind of where we become victims of our world.
Yeah.
Here's all the things I have to do. Again, very low vibration, very dense. There's not a lot of freedom in it. The next one is I want. Right. And that's where most people, that's where I want most people to get to, right? To get to a space where it's like, if you want something, do you believe that you can create it? Right. So if we're the creators of our world, if I ask, what do I want? Back to like even the beginning of how difficult that question could be.
Yeah.
Because I've been told what I should want. So I don't know. I haven't even dreamed of anything else. I want is a really beautiful space of saying, I am asking a question and I am painting a picture, whatever that is, and I can receive or create any of it that I want to.
Yeah.
The highest one is I am, which means everything is already right here. And so when we walk in life knowing that I already am, we don't get stuck in lack, basically.
I love that.
Yeah, I would say that we're the creator of our world, and we already, I am is a very real deal for all of us. And the ego will fight the second you say it. So if I say, I want, you'll hear all of this, I can't and I have to come up to the surface so that we can say, oh, I no longer want that pattern. But it gets scary because it's like, oh, wait a second, I've always believed this. So I'm going to go back to I can't. Just know that anytime we raise our vibration, anything old is actually going to come up to say, do you want to let this go? Yeah. And so many times we just jump back into what is. So walking around feeling the vibration of I am is scary to the ego because then it doesn't have purpose and lack and doesn't have to fix all of these things. And there's just a very real presence to it. So, yeah.
Wow.
I
It's a fun one.
love that.
Okay, well, I feel like I have to thank you, even though I've done it a million times.
Oh, yeah. I
but,
loved
like,
it. Thank you guys. How
you
fun.
are.
I just, I was driving here and I was thinking, this is such a surreal moment from, again, how, I've said it a million times, how quick and how powerful you guys, I knew immediately that you were going to change so many lives and you're doing it. And so it's just as much fun for me to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you.
I love you guys.
We love you like more than you know. So
Oh,
thank you. But
it's mutual.
if you guys liked this episode, which we hope that you did, share it with somebody that you may find that needs it. And if you have questions for Tawnya, let us know. We will put her information, her email on the show notes if you guys can get in touch with her. She's an incredible coach. And so if you guys feel like she's a good fit, hit her up. We obviously owe our lives to her. So we love you. Thank you again.
You guys. Thank
You're
you.
amazing. And tune in next week.